The Committee on Health, Economic Development, Homeland Security, Senior Citizens now convenes this public hearing. Public hearing notices were provided. First notice on Thursday, November 10th, and second notice on Tuesday, November 15th. For the record, today's Friday, November 18th, and the time now is 11:05 a.m. The committee will hear and accept testimonies, both oral and written, on the following. Bill 395, introduced by B.J.F. Cruz, an act to amend subsections 4301A, 4302C2, both Article 3, Chapter 4, Title 4, Guam Code annotated, relative to ensuring that the only most economical and beneficial healthcare insurance proposal plan for Government of Guam employees and retirees and foster children is forwarded by the Government of Guam Health Insurance Negotiating Team to Gohan for consideration, and to divesting the legislature final approval authority over any contract entered into Gohan for the same. Bill 377-33. This is relative to improving government resources for veterans struggling with mental health issues, introduced by Senator Aguon. Bill 328 is relative to adopting the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact pursuant to law. Bill 316, introduced by Vice Chairman Tony Atta. This is relative to authorizing access to and use of experimental treatments for patients with an advanced illness, to establish conditions for use of experimental treatment, to prohibit sanctions of healthcare providers solely for recommending or providing experimental treatment, to clarify duties of a health insurer with regard to experimental treatment authored under this act, to prohibit certain actions by public officials, employees, and agents, and to restrict certain causes of action arising from experimental treatment. Bill 173, introduced by Senator Brant McCreadie. This is relative to shelter infrastructure and employment services for the homeless. And finally, Bill 172, introduced by Senator Nicolas, relative to the establishment of operational continuity plans for each agency of the Government of Guam. I'd like to recognize my Vice Chairman, Senator Tony Atta. Thank you very much. Senator Frank Aguon Jr. and Senator Mary Torres. Thank you very much, Senators, for joining me. First on the agenda is Bill 395, introduced by the Vice Speaker. And I know Senator Aguon has an opening statement that will be read into the record. Senator?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is written testimony by the sponsor of Bill number 395-33, Vice Speaker Benjamin J.F. Cruz. Half a day. I want to thank Chairman Rodriguez for agreeing to hear Bill number 395-33, my measure to ensure that the administration choose only the most economical and beneficial healthcare insurance proposal plan for Government of Guam, GovGuam employees and retirees. After 2 consecutive years of the administration choosing a Government of Guam health insurance contract, which costs our taxpayers millions more than its alternative, a decision that is now jeopardizing retirees' medical, dental, and life MDL insurance coverage altogether, enough is enough. Under Bill number 395-33, only the most affordable scenario will be forwarded to ADLA for signature, noting, of course, that any insurance proposal must cover the exact same benefits for every subscriber. But to explain how we got here today, it is imperative that we understand the process by which a health insurance contract is negotiated and signed. Public Law 31-97. The enactment of Public Law 31-197 in fiscal year 2012 mandated that the procurement for the largest contract of the Government of Guam, one that provides health insurance coverage for Government of Guam employees, retirees, and their dependents, solicit both exclusive and non-exclusive proposals from each health insurance provider. In an exclusive plan, the insurer is the sole provider for each of GovGuam's employees and retirees. In the non-exclusive, the insurer is one provider out of a total of 3 qualified carriers. It also mandated that the health insurance negotiating team enter into negotiations with the top 3 ranked proposals in order to promote competition and prevent the Government of Guam back then from only negotiating with the highest ranked health insurance provider that submitted a single proposal. Prior to the enactment of Public Law 31-197, the negotiations team had the power to rank health insurance proposals submitted, and as a result could have only negotiated with one health insurance provider and not all providers that submitted a proposal. It is impossible to ignore the obvious conflict of interest apparent in this very important contract. In fact, the governor actively and consciously recuses himself from signing this multi-million-dollar contract because of this conflict. With the procurement process now mandating both the submission of exclusive and non-exclusive proposals from health insurance providers, the consequences, intended or not, promotes competition, not only among the different health insurance providers, but now among the two types of contract options, the exclusive and non-exclusive plan. The existing procurement and negotiating team has worked. It has produced and negotiated costs that could have saved the government millions. It is now incumbent on us to no longer ignore their good work, ensuring that the most economical and beneficial option is chosen so that we can avail ourselves of these potential savings. Health insurance negotiations. For those that are unaware of the process, the negotiations team issues a request for proposal seeking potential insurance plans from qualified providers. The team then negotiates with the top 3 ranked proposals for both an exclusive and non-exclusive plan. Once negotiations are completed, the team is mandated to submit a memo to the governor and the Guam legislature, which will include one exclusive provider option and one non-exclusive option. Each memo includes estimates of cost savings if either option is chosen. The lieutenant governor, who takes the place of the governor due to his conflict of interest, then has the power to select either the exclusive or non-exclusive option. Since fiscal year 2014, the very first fiscal year in which the government of Guam and its health insurance negotiations team accepted and negotiated both an exclusive and non-exclusive plan, the exclusive option was always determined to have the lowest cost to the government of Guam. Estimated savings. For the past 4 fiscal years, the government of Guam decided to sign the non-exclusive proposal, which included Calvo Select Care, Take Care, and either Net Care or Stay Well, depending on the fiscal year, rather than signing the exclusive contract with one carrier, which was either Take Care or Net Care, depending on the fiscal year. Collectively, this has cost the government of Guam nearly $55 million more than the alternative of choosing the exclusive contract. While some have argued that this figure is inflated or a mere point for negotiation, I can only judge the evidence before me. These estimates are not mine. They're from the health insurance negotiations team memos sent to the lieutenant governor, the team which is chaired by the governor's own director of administration. When compared to fiscal year 2013 contract costs, the total annual savings for the exclusive option was estimated to be $18.7 million. For fiscal year 2015, the total annual savings was estimated to be $6.3 million. And in fiscal year 2016, the savings were estimated at $7.6 million. This fiscal year 2017, when compared to the previous fiscal year contract costs, the total annual savings, if the exclusive option had been chosen, was estimated to be $21.6 million. If I were to estimate the possible savings, the figure would have been much greater. The memos take the estimated cost for the next fiscal year and compare it to the current fiscal year. If you take the actual cost based on actual enrollment and utilize the exclusive premiums versus the non-exclusive premiums for the same fiscal year, instead of an estimate of next year versus this year, the government of Guam could have saved nearly $75 million over the past 4 fiscal years. Conclusion. Bill number 395-33 is very simple. Instead of the negotiations team submitting a memo to the lieutenant governor that includes both the exclusive and non-exclusive option, and then empowering him to choose the most expensive option, which has made absolutely no fiscal sense in recent deficit years, Bill 395 mandates that the negotiations team submit only the single most economical and beneficial option to the lieutenant governor for his signing and approval. This takes out any politics in the selection of either exclusive or non-exclusive and has the potential to save the government of Guam millions of dollars by preventing the more costly decision to be made. I understand that different recommendations will be made that suggest an overhaul of the entire procurement process of this large contract. Until we can ensure an arm's length transaction and deal with any apparent conflict of interest, The cumbersome process of procuring this large contract only shields the people of Guam from any potential for corruption. This last piece of the puzzle, Bill number 395-33, now closes a loophole that has long been taken advantage of under the guise of providing choice to the government of Guam employees and retirees. Now is the time to make the fiscally correct decision. Bill number 395-33 does this, ensuring the most affordable deal to our taxpayers and achieving the coverage our employees and retirees deserve. The Honorable Vice Speaker Benjamin J.F. Cruz. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator. Mr. Frank Campillo, signed up to testify. If there's anyone else that wishes to testify, please come up. I want to recognize former Senator Francis Santos. Thank you very much for being here. Morning.
Good morning, Senators. We are providing a verbal testimony today, and we hope to provide you with our written testimony by Monday. Okay. So we were here about a week ago, basically kind of testifying on the same type of bill. I know it was an oversight, but the bill was brought up. One of the things that was consistent with the testimonies that I saw from everybody is that we should let market forces be the ones that dictate what's offered to the government of Guam employees. We should allow options. We stated in our testimony that even during the periods that we became the sole and only provider of benefits to the government of Guam, it was not because we wanted to be the only and sole provider. It was because others have left the market. The federal government and every single state government throughout the nation provides options to their consumers, to the government of Guam retirees and active employees. We believe that this is something that should be kept. When you talk about economical plan and better plan, it becomes very, very, very difficult to determine what is so. For instance, if you were to choose one of the other providers today, that provider limits a lot of the options that are available even on Guam to some of the members. For instance, I know that at least one provider does not allow currently, at least up until yesterday, access to GRMC and does not allow access to the Guam radiology consultants where they have various and several specialties. So more affordable, most economical becomes very difficult to determine because you can actually limit the access that individuals have to care. Today, I think that the best thing that the government of Guam can do is something that we suggested during the last hearing or the last oversight last week, and that is if you're concerned about costs and budgetary projections, the best thing that you can do to allow you to have that cost fixed is to set a limit as to what you're going to pay for a single, for a couple, and for a family, both under the active employees and the retired employees. That already gives you a budgetary projections. It will be legislated, and it will not have, because you will limit that. That's what many states do. This is the maximum amount that we're going to pay for a single, couple, family. And then it allows, and you should go back to the old system that allows not only one company or two companies or three companies, it allows as many companies that wanted to provide benefits to the government of Guam to put an RFP, or for those that were renewing to put a bid process. We suggested also in the previous testimony that the current process is cumbersome. The renewal should be simpler, should be a 5-pager the same way that the federal government allows it today. So we believe that you should still allow for choices to the employees of the government of Guam. If you're concerned about costs and budget, you should limit that cost and budget by setting some ceilings as to the amount that you contribute for single, couple, family. I know that Vice Speaker is one of those that likes detail, and something that is lacking on the testimony and for your consideration is the fact that the government of Guam also has received over $15 million worth of rebates because they have a participating contract, so that should be subtracted from any amounts of cost that is being stated. despite the inflation factors that you have seen throughout time, and when you look at the government of Guam rates, what were being charged some 12, 15 years ago, they're fairly consistent with what they're being charged today. The government of Guam hasn't seen a significant increase in rates, despite the fact that throughout the nation, we've seen a huge increase in rates because of the increases in prescription drugs, the increases in hospital costs, and the inflation, the medical inflation factors. So what we suggest is that if you're going to set yourself a budget, to do it in that manner. That way, you know ahead of time. You don't have to wait for the negotiating committee to provide the choices, the options, because you will already have a budget for that. And that's our verbal testimony. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. We will be happy to provide a written testimony by Monday.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Campello. Senator Aguon, do you have any? Senator Ada or Senator Torres?
I understand what your recommendation is, and it's sound. We already have that in some ways. We have a budget that the legislature passes, and that budget amount is usually passed ahead of the negotiation contract signing, or at least the numbers are consistent. So I question whether, because it's already in place, it's not necessarily followed, because it's not mandated that we stick to that. Do you understand what I mean? We have a budget amount, and yet the contract amount far exceeds it. So you would think that under normal circumstances with other government agencies, if they understand what their cap is, they don't negotiate for something higher than that. It becomes, they either redo the bids or they cancel the bids. Yeah. So I'm just trying to see, as a practical point, how do you avoid that? Because we have that scenario presently.
Correct. And as during the testimony last week, Senator, basically the concern was that sometimes these processes become late and become, or the information comes out after the budget law has been passed, right? Or after the budget has been passed for the government of Guam. And that's the reason why I suggest that in this case, you will already set your budget ahead of time. And you should allow, for instance, an inflation factor to occur on an annual basis based on the consumer price index. But at least you will have that information ahead of time. They will not go above the budget. The only variable in this particular process will be the number of people that will be insured. But that variable change is very minor. So you will have ahead of time your budgets. And you will have what you contribute for a single couple family, much like most companies decide and do. For instance, when we put the federal government has it that way, most large companies tells you this is the maximum that I'm going to contribute on behalf of my employees. So at least you know ahead of time, and you will be able to have that budget process, which includes CPI inflation for future years.
So essentially, what it becomes then for the bidders is, or the people that are putting in their proposals is it's a matter of the amount of services that will be provided for the price, as opposed to, is what you're saying. The price is fixed, and then it becomes a variable about what offerings, what package, whether one can provide more under that price package, and then that then drives the customer to choose that.
And what we suggested, Senator, also was set up a minimum set of benefits also that each company needs to at least guarantee that are provided to the government of Guam employees and retirees. Now, where the differences become will be, okay, does this company have access to 2 hospitals on Guam or only 1? Does this company have access to 1 radiological facility on Guam or 2? Does this company provide access to continental U.S. providers? Does this company provide access to hospitals in Hawaii, for instance? Does this company have a wide range of prescription drug formularies? Many limit. For instance, in my testimony last week, I know that up until recently, up until my testimony, that one company was not covering drugs for hepatitis C, and those are drugs that are $95,000 for treatment. So that's where the difference starts. So, but if you set up a minimum set of benefits, if you set up budgets for single couple family, both on the active and retirees, you will have the information ahead of time, and you probably won't have to go through this process ever and ever again. That process with all the respect, senators, I think that the process prior to fiscal year 2011 worked for everybody. Even every year during those 5 years or so that we became by default the only company that was providing benefits, the bids were sent out every year, the RFPs were open every year, and that process worked. The reason why it becomes a little difficult nowadays is because even during the negotiations now, despite the fact that they ask you for some minimum benefits, they also, the negotiating committee sometimes asks, okay, what about if you give us this other benefit for the retirees? Or what if we have this other plan? So if you constrain the process, limit by the amount of contributions that you have, single, couple, family, limit by the minimum benefits that a company needs to provide, I think you will be set, and I think the issue of politics or any other issues will be taken out of the process.
Is it possible to also have a scenario where the government has a baseline insurance coverage where they provide basic necessities, emergency care, certain things like that, and then employees, if they choose to increase their coverage, that comes at their own dime? Is that another option that because then you solve the needs. Some people have greater needs than others, and
correct, and that could be another
and the
option,
variable
Senator.
is borne by
Correct.
the individual as opposed to the government.
Which you do by setting up those, again, as I said, those minimum benefits and those minimum contributions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Espaldon, thank you for joining us. You have any questions? Okay. So thank you for your testimony. Just a quick question. How much did you say the rebates over the past few years?
Over the past 4 years were in excess of $15 million.
15.
I don't have the exact dollar amount, Senator, but they're in excess of $15 million. Yeah.
Okay. So I know that your company is also doing the federal contract. And prior to how it was now, where there's two carriers, it was just the way that the government of Guam was, where it's a single carrier.
No, actually, my apologies. It's actually more than two carriers. What people don't realize is that the federal government, for the people that reside in Guam, you have about 10 options. What happens is the only two local options are both Take Care and us, but they also can choose Blue Cross Blue Shield and others. So it's about 10 options. It's not only one. Now, that the local community likes to have the ability to go to a local company, to go to have a local customer service, a face-to-face review, and that's the reason why about 90% of them are insured for the local insurance companies. But there is about 10 other options, and the government of the United States of America has about 100 options throughout the country for their employees. Mm-hmm. They have made since 1958, they had made 2 changes to their federal procurement process. 2 changes. I began doing government of Guam in 1994, but since 2010 or so, we have seen about 6 different changes to the procurement process by different legislative actions. The federal government only has 2 since 1958.
Okay. So does the federal government, is that what you're saying, how they do it? They set a budget before the bids go out and the negotiations happen? Is that how it's done?
They said first is a process that I have suggested to the government of Guam to emulate. First, if you are going to participate in that, they qualify the company. Now, the qualification process is quite rigorous. You have to provide a lot of information. But once you qualify, the renewal process is only a 5-pager. Your validation for any changes in benefits, your validation for any increase in costs, but it's only a 5-pager. For the government of Guam today, every year you got to submit like about 18 binders that are about 2.5 inches worth of information, which is the same. Okay, what is the name of your company? Well, by now they know every single company in Guam. And information that is repetitive. The same questions are asked every year. How do you pay participating providers? So what I suggest is that for companies that are going to be new in the process, that you validate them, that you qualify them based on simple criteria. I mean, if the insurance commissioner gives you a license, I think that the insurance commission is responsible enough to let you know whether or not you're able to do business. So based on a simple criteria, you qualify the company, then the renewal process for those that are already in should be no more than a 5-pager. Here is my renewal, these are my rates, and that should be the process like the federal government has since 1958.
And I think that's one of the discussions that you were having during the oversight, right, as the process. But I think for this one, the underlying concern is the cost. But I want to say that 5 or 6 years ago when we changed it, Public Law 31-197, I know the industry and others were saying this is going to happen. If you're going to open it up now to give the employees and the retirees choice, you're going to see the costs escalate. And but at that time, the question was, do we want to give our employees the options to choose? And so we did. And so that was followed. And if you recall, last term and even this term, there was a bill that was introduced, that I introduced, that we didn't move forward, but was to end the exclusive contracts and ensure that moving forward, it's always the options of giving the options to the employees. But now that underlying concern is the cost. When we see what it costs today for those options, and what it would have cost if it was only one provider. And so I think that's the underlying concern here that we really have to get ourselves past.
And Senator, to that point, cost really, when you look at on a single couple and family, has not increased that dramatically. When you look at the 2000 plan, from 2007 to today, the current options that are being offered to the government of Guam today, they're cheaper today than they were in 2007. And in 2011, fiscal year 2011, as you know, a new set of benefits came out because of the ACA, Obamacare. We increased our annual limits to basically, we remove all annual limits. Every single plan in Guam had a $200,000 maximum off-island benefit. That was removed. We now provide preventive health care services without a co-payment. We now provide an extensive array of benefits. So when you adjust by the benefits that are provided to the government of Guam today, when you adjust by the inflation, because as you know, recently hospital has increased rates dramatically and inflation factors have occurred because of prescription drugs. The rates that are being paid, at least on the active plan for the active employees, 2000, are cheaper today than what they were being paid in 2007, 10 years ago. That doesn't happen in any place in America, Senator. So I think the system allows itself now. What we forget is that we have more participation, that the cost has risen not because of the cost of insurance itself, but because we have more participation. The area where you see also cost increases because now we have a new offering for the retirees of the government of Guam. We have that RSP plan that now provides supplemental benefits for those who are in Medicare A and B. The cost has risen because the retiree plan subsidizes Medicare A, Medicare B, Medicare D, and now the new RSP. The subsidies that are being provided on the retiree side for healthcare have increased dramatically too. So the factors that are being looked at, what has caused health insurance premiums to overall increase in Guam, are not necessarily due to the specific cost directly per individual, but rather because you have higher number of people insured, higher numbers, and because the new offerings that you have for the retiree part.
Yeah, I'm glad you explained it that way because, as you know, the committee is a member of the negotiating team, and I know the team has done a very good job in keeping the cost down, just like you've mentioned. If you compare that to what it was 2007 and now, so that's a very good explanation in trying to figure out why is their costs much higher.
And if I may, in the testimony that we provided during the oversight last week, if you look at, we gave you the different states and municipalities across the nation that you can compare. Well, the NCL, the National Council of State Legislators, can give you those comparative analysis, and it shows that in the last 5 years, for instance, the increase for state employees have gone up by average of about 20% cumulatively. In Guam, when you compare to 2007, really you've seen that you got more benefits. And for the 2000 plan, at least the active employees, you have less cost today than you had in 2007.
Okay, so my final question is that if we go back to what it was prior to 31-197, where it was just a single carrier.
Well, there was actually no law for that, Senator, ever. The only reason why there was only a single provider is because nobody else wanted to bid. Remember that one company spent $2 million suing government of Guam to leave Guam. Another company left. But even during those years when there was only one company, the Department of Administration issued RFPs, bids, nobody wanted to bid. Now, since then, companies have come up and we welcome competition. I think we all do an excellent job. If I was just thinking, for instance, because Francis is still back there, as to how competitive we are. But yet, for instance, when we needed to have something that would have affected the industry and the race on Guam dramatically, that we were united to go up to Washington, D.C., to many of the officers of the federal government to try to get some of the Obamacare rules removed and waived for Guam. And we did as a united front. But yet, when it comes time to put a rate in front of an account, we're very competitive. And competition is something that was used to bring, because there was no need for that law that was introduced, 1 or 3. Everybody was allowed to bid for the government of Guam. The qualification process was there. Never ever was a single law that allowed for a 1 until the 1 and 3 was implemented. But before that, everybody was allowed to bid.
No, the law back then was that it was only the award was given to one carrier. And so, yeah, you're right. It's open for anybody to submit a proposal, but it was only awarded to one carrier. It wasn't a.
My apologies for sounding argumentative, but it wasn't such. For instance, when I was with multi-cover that became Netcare, it was open to all carriers. When we came into the market, it was open to all carriers. Again, 2 carriers dropped, but even during those time, Senators, it was open to all carriers.
And so the government was able to award to multi-carriers?
The government was able to award to multi-carriers before the law was changed in 2011. Yes, multi-carriers. The thing is that nobody was bidding in that time. One company, as I shared with you, sued the government of Guam because they have that continuity provision language in the contract. They sued Guam and spent about $2 million to get out of Guam. Now, what I suggest is go back to that old time where you allow multiple carriers, set up your limits of contributions and set up your minimum benefits, and that will fix the process.
And now it shows that because of when this law was changed, you have carriers that now are providing their proposals. So if we do go back to that, there's that possibility that it won't be just one carrier providing proposals.
Well, remember that part of the change in the law that was possibly helpful to the process is that now you give the carriers that want to bid utilization data. So that was what became the key component of companies to wanting to come back to the government of Guam. That they now, during the RFP process, during the current process, you're giving access to utilization data, which works well. And actually, the providers are actually upset now because that allows carriers to find out what each one of us paid to providers, and some can construe that as being a little bit anti-competition. But anyway, that's what really made the change, that now carriers get utilization data.
Okay, thank you. Senator, I really wish you can join the conversation. I twisted your arm.
Fairness to Franco, joined it.
Thank you, Francis.
Okay, Frank. So in defense of our industry, throughout the history, and I agree with Frank, I think the process needs to be altered, right? I mean, competition dictates the rates. You're right, Senator Torres, that in our business it's called buy-up. If you want a Cadillac plan, the basic is this, but if you want the Cadillac, it's going to cost you more. Okay, but you stand the risk there of a misinformed member not knowing, given the type of open enrollment you guys have, it's an absolute disservice. Okay, so you need to fix that process. But it's not uncommon in our industry to have a basic plan, which Frank is reiterating to you, and then a more attractive, more enhanced plan. And your government did that. It eliminated that. Okay, so if you want choice, you don't necessarily put it at the carrier's level. You come back and say, I need these benefits, emergency care, preventive care, and so on. And then, but maybe I want transplants, maybe I want Botox, maybe I want this. And, that's going to cost you that much. You want it, you buy it, and then let the carriers dictate, if they want to be in that, they'll bid, and it might be expensive. But again, that option is there. I mean, I think what Senator Cruz is driving is, if we're looking really at cost, yeah, there's no doubt that the numbers speak for themselves. But then you stand the risk of what happens if that carrier, like Frank says, I've had enough of this, I'm going to leave the market. And then you have the reluctance to come back into the market. So I think if you just start there, and I know the challenge of the contribution side, because I sat where you sat, and although I would disagree with Frank about, if you set the rate for the single, the couple, and the family, and then let the market forces dictate, that's higher math for all of us, trust me. Because as the system is done right now, I don't think the general public knows that as a taxpayer, I'm paying about $26,000 for a retiree out of the taxpayer's money. Okay, that's for me the travesty of not the transparency in this contract, is that you're not telling the taxpayers really what the contribution is. That's why you heard me as a CCU commissioner says, we're done. We cannot continue to tell our ratepayers that we actually went out there and found the best deal for the GPA and GWA employees. Because I can speak from talking to our HR people there that they have never been invited to the table. And we're not asking for them to negotiate. We're asking for them just to come there on behalf of our employees, our retirees, and say, this is really what you're going to get. The basic question for me is, did you at least say, hey, maybe we want this benefit? It said, no, sir, we're never invited. So we made a decision as the CCU said, we're going to explore our options. And I think as prudent elected board members, we need to do that. I know what it's going to do to the risk pool because I've been there before. But at the other side for me is I'm wearing the hat of a commissioner whose duty is to make sure that we're getting the best possible deal for the ratepayer. So your job is, are you getting the best possible deal for the taxpayer on behalf of the, 50, how many members? 30,000 GovGuam, members that are out there. So, yeah, so really, I get it. It's a struggle for Frank and the industry to sit here and say, because it's a big market. This is the largest single contract in GovGuam, I think, other than the GPA full contract. So every year you're making, $80, $100 million decisions. And it's a tough one. And I can stand here and say, you really need to sit down, figure this out, because it impacts everything, guys. Impacts what happens to the hospital, it impacts what happens to Medicaid, MIP, because a lot of this is driven. But if you're concerned about access to medical care, the market will dictate that. Okay, Frank said it right. One provider doesn't go to GRMC, that's fine. That's the provider's choice. Okay, you don't choose that health plan. You go to the Select Care health plan or the other health plan that provides that. And the same, when you look at the kind of benefits you want, start with a standard, okay? And then price out, the really enhancements that you want to do. You can't sell an enhanced plan. You just don't do it right now. But you know what? Let them design it and let them see. Let the employee decide if they really want that. Okay?
Thank you very much. Any other questions, Senators?
Mr. Chair, may I? And I'm sorry for being a little bit late. I had a previous engagement. I guess the basic question, and it's probably been answered in so many different ways, but perhaps it could get more succinct. Just a general question. So this bill before us basically proposes to limit insurance coverage to just one company at the lowest bidder. What's the downside to that? what it says is the most economical beneficial bidder, right? Okay, and
So again, if I want to give you the most economical rate, yeah, I can give you access to one hospital. I can give you access to limit your access to specialty care. I can limit the prescription drug access that you have to. So basically, you can. I mean, there's no different than going. You can buy a real small Indian car now for $5,000. As you know, Tata sells for $5,000, but it barely moves. And I think that this population in government of Guam, the active employees and the retirees, have gotten used to companies that provide access to a wider number of providers. So the downside is that you're going to get limited access to providers. In fact, I was on the opposite side last week saying, did you guys know that you provide the least amount, at least for the active employees, least amount of contributions than any state and municipality in the nation provides for the active employees as far as healthcare? The lowest, by fact. And again, I beg you to go to the National Council of State Legislatures. It provides that information to you. But the downside is that you're going to limit the quality of benefits that a member will have access to. You know, we hear this in healthcare all the time. Give me the lowest, cheapest plan and provide me quality. Senators, I get news for you. That doesn't go together. Quality demands some cost. So that's where the downside is, that your employees, your coworkers, your retirees are going to feel the brunt of a plan that is not going to have access to a lot of providers. It's not going to provide you a wide formulary for your drugs. As I told you earlier, up until recently, I knew that there was a plan that doesn't cover hepatitis C medication. That's $95,000. So that person ain't going to get access to something like that. So that's the downside.
Yeah, partly so, but I think that's where your negotiating team dictates that. Okay, but you also need to help the negotiating team by having, you know, a list of mandated benefits. I mean, on Guam, you want to say, I want every provider that's, you know, licensed to do business on Guam to be covered under this plan, and make that a requirement of your RFP. So that takes care of your access issue. And then, like I said earlier, when you start talking about going off island, then Frank is absolutely right. Do you want a narrow network of providers, or do you want a wide network of providers? And then that drives your cost. So you're right, Senator Spaldon. If you're looking for economics and physically responsible, then an exclusive contract is going to give you that. And the downside is the fact that you may narrow your choices, scale down your benefits. We're not bound, so you know, by Obamacare. Okay, the territories are exempt, so you don't need to have unlimited care off island. You know, again, the plans, through their power of negotiating, can drive a different type provider arrangement with a provider off island. I mean, I can speak that GRMC, because of its relationship with TMC, will certainly, you know, drive a different type rate for the continuity of care that starts here and goes to TMC, you know, for additional care that's not necessarily available here, but we'll want that same patient to go to our sister hospital, you know, to get that type of care. Again, the power of negotiation is given to the provider, meaning the carrier, to do that. They bring that type of expertise and rating to the table and say, well, I can do that and they can't. You know, and that again is, you know, he has the volume, meaning at Select Care, to do that because of the size of the plan he has.
I appreciate that. I guess, you know, in a point that was made, that, you know, just in the past few minutes, I guess that begs the question then, just to be clear for a lot of us who don't understand, not all insurance carriers are accepted or have the same coverage to or access to all the doctors on this island. In other words, some carriers have access to certain physicians and, you know, may overlap with other carriers, but they also have access to probably a broader range of physicians.
Correct. And as I said, up until yesterday, Senator, I know that at least one provider doesn't have access to GRMC, or does not give their members access to GRMC. Does not give their members access to Guam Radiology Consultants, which also has In sometimes, before GRMC had the only cardiologists on the island, had the only nuclear medicine on the island. So all of these were specialties that are being not provided or given access to by at least one plan. So those are things that you can possibly encounter in the government of Guam contract if you went into that direction. Because again, most economical, you got to limit things. There is no the 2 and 2 doesn't go together. There is no way that you can provide access and provide wide choices and provide lowest, because it doesn't work together. Now, the government of Guam also limit the amount that, because you have that now, the participating contract. So it's limiting the amount that companies can actually make in this contract as well. You have that, and as I said earlier, to those numbers that were stated earlier, you got to add that about excess of $15 million have been provided back to the government of Guam. You got to also realize this, Senator, that the government of Guam is not necessarily one of the best payers, as you know, when it comes to healthcare. That we're financing this, that we're paying our doctors on time, but the government of Guam is not necessarily on time. So there's a lot of variables. I really think that the system is not as broken as we think it is, and I don't think we need to tweak it as often as we need to. The federal government, as I said, since 1958, 2 changes, 1958 to their entire procurement process of healthcare benefits. And when you talk about enrollment, for instance, the federal government is the largest employer in the country, and they only provide a 30-day enrollment process as well for their employees, which is what in most part has been provided locally too, so 30 days.
Yeah. I think going back, Senator Spadon, is again starting with a list of mandated benefits, and then a list of, if you make it a requirement that you have to provide access to all the licensed medical providers on Guam, it's moot. You got to submit your RFP and your response based on that. You come in and you don't meet that criteria, you're done. That eliminates you from the list. So you set the criteria up, and they I'm sure they have a compelling reason why they don't want to be part of the network, whatever the case may be. But if you're designing your benefit package with these set of benefits, and I want access to all the local providers, and then I want Manila, I want Hawaii, I want so and so. Again, you dictate that again. But going back, the other thing you might want to consider is that, depending again on your off-island coverage, how much do you really want to cover? Those are the things that I think you can sit down and really work with the team, of course, and analyze the cost. And I don't want to say you're going to start rationing care, but that's really what it comes down to. If it's coming down to a financial decision, a family makes that kind of decision. We can't afford to eat this today, but maybe later on down the road. But again, so you're talking about a large family here called Gov Guam, and the added burdens the retirees. So it's difficult, and it's more, I think what Frank and you listened to earlier is not necessarily change the process, but refine the process might be really where you're heading towards.
Thank you very much.
Just to recap, when we start talking, and again, this is more for the viewers out there. So so this bill again proposes to try to get it to one carrier at the most whoever provides the most economical rate. I'm hearing that, in essence, before we even go down this road, we need to refine our process, because we might be able to bring the costs down to the government if we do that first, as opposed to just narrow in on the subject of going with a single carrier.
And that one has to be careful what you ask for, Senator. We got numbers, and we did model some potential. Believe you me, it's not in our interest to put numbers out there that are not what our actuarial people believe is the most economical plan that we can provide to the government of Guam.
Sure.
Because you want to attract people. But there are some numbers that really just scratch your head as to whether or not those numbers are sustainable. If the numbers that are being put out are really, really sustainable. We model for instance, some of what we believe may have been some numbers provided to Guam, because we don't have that information, but we modeled those. And based on the information that our actuarials did, a loss ratio of 120% could have been incurred if those numbers were really true. So you have a company here today, but you may not have a company tomorrow. That's something that you also need to be responsible to your members, because in fact, one of the most difficult things that the federal government had to allow a second provider from Guam, again, Senator, you get more than 10 that they have access to, was that unfortunately they had that experience with one company on Guam. So your negotiating team also needs to be responsible to make sure that the rates that are being provided are really responsible enough that this company is going to be in business, because it's not in your benefit if you have to bill it out, if payments are not going to be made to the Guam Memorial Hospital, that you may have to bill out also the Guam Memorial Hospital again. So the responsibility is in many parts that lowest is not going to translate really into the most beneficial for the government Guam employees and retirees.
I appreciate that. The last question I have, Mr. Chair, would be, in last week's roundtable or public hearing, Mr. Campilla, you mentioned that perhaps we should also look at getting away from the annual negotiating process and go with perhaps maybe even a 2-year kind of contract. If we go down that road, does that offer any cost savings to the government?
And I answered that, Senator, for the same way, and that is that companies adjust for what is called medical inflation factors.
Okay.
A 2-year rate clearly is somewhat higher than a 1-year rate.
Okay.
Would you agree with that?
Yes. I mean, you got to allow the health plan to factor in what potentially could happen in year 2.
That's right.
You could be profitable in year 1, and year 2 you tank.
Okay.
But again, the converse answer to that, Senator Spadon, is we're in the risk business.
Right.
Okay. So that's why we're here, wanting the business from GovGuam. So going back to the question of an exclusive single carrier, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, certainly it's attractive because you have it all, but then the downside is that you could suffer a great loss this 1 year. I mean, but again, we're in the risk business. And that's actuarially, you're hoping that rate is sound. I mean, Frank made a good point. If there was a substantial savings, the risk really is not GovGuam's risk, it's that carrier's risk. And you hope that they do it, and if they don't, believe me, they'll be coming back either saying we're done or we need a big rate increase. So that's how the process should go.
Thank you. I appreciate the answers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Senator Spaldoni, if I may add, the federal government actually, when you submit your numbers to the actuarial office, at least they have the benefit that they have. Well, we've been to OPM. Well, we've been to CMS. We see how the United States taxpayers' dollars are being spent. A lot of conference rooms. Huh? So anyway, the other issue is that the actuarial office tells you your rates are too low. The federal government actually has at least the discretion to tell you you're not going to make money, and we don't want you around if you're not going to make money. They actually tell you got to adjust your rates upwards. I mean, too big to fail is no longer acceptable, and that's part of the responsibility that legislative committees have, that negotiating committees have, to ensure that the rates that are being also presented or provided are going to be sustainable.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Spadon. Thank you to Mr. Campillo and to Senator. We'll work with the sponsor. We'll also work with you as the industry to see how we can really kind of come to terms in what we want to do here, because with what was discussed in the oversight hearing and what is discussed today, I think there's a middle ground that we gotta be able to come up to, right? But in closing, I know there's a lot of talk also about the increased use of the plan for people who are getting more sicker, and I know there's a lot of attempts to try to get our community healthier through wellness plans. Even with the Medicaid program, we're working on incentives to get people more active and changing their lifestyle. I know, like in Seattle, I think I always mentioned this to you. My sister-in-law lives out there, and they're more aggressive in their plans there and how they get people more healthier. in a year, if you don't use or if you do certain things and you remain healthy, the company actually pays for the whole entire premium for that entire year, right? And so it's something that it's not uncommon if you look at what's happening in the U.S. mainland. I think that's something we got to do more here, is incentivize and do more to incentivize our people to use the wellness benefits that are part of the plan.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because, as I said earlier, when you compare the rates that are being provided today to the government of Guam versus 2007, the rates, at least for the actives, are very similar. Yet the actives, the population, are getting more wellness benefits by all the providers, not only by us, but all the providers. You're providing incentives if you go to the gym. You're providing incentives if you go to if you have your annual exams. Those incentives are means of rebates that are giving back to people, so they're being done, and people are beginning to use them more and more, and more education is being done today. In fact, the amount of work and benefits that are being provided just recently was stated by a consultant that we had to have on in-house to review some of our processes is, you provide a lot for the amount of premiums. I said, when you compare the premiums that the government of Guam active employees pay, and even the retirees, by the way, compared to national standards, they're significantly lower than what they are in continental U.S. And part of that, and I'm glad that that Francis brought up the issue of the Philippines, is if we ever lost the Philippines as a possible option for our members here in Guam, God help us, because our rates will be at least double what they are today. So that has been, and we had a lot of concerns with some of the statements that were made initially by the current president in regards to visas needed and so forth. So, but the point it's a long answer, but the point to your point is, yes, we had many more benefits to the government of Guam employees and retirees today than in 2007, and adjusted for inflation. And when you compare active to active, the rates are not that different.
Mr. Chair, based upon that answer, may I ask one more question? Mr. Campe, basically, you're saying that those members who participate in these wellness programs basically get a rebate because they're in these programs. I think more money goes back to the people. Does that include more money going back to GovGuam, or does that translate just to the members and not back to GovGuam?
Well, there's been some money goes back to the government of Guam, but because there is a participating contract, so you limit the amount that companies can hold. But these incentives have been incentives for people to become healthier, to have healthier lifestyles. For instance, if you go to the gym at least 10 times, you get, at least in our side, $25 per month. If you get your annual exams, you get 20. So those
and that goes back to the member, not
exactly.
to the government, because the government covers a certain percentage of that.
But there is a indirect benefit to the government of Guam by keeping these people healthier, Senator. So technically, overall savings should be realized by keeping this population healthier. And you got to motivate the individual. You know, the government by itself doesn't move. It's the individuals that will get these actions.
I understand what you're saying, but I guess an alternative perspective may be that if there was something that came back to the government, then the government perhaps would be more proactive in pushing its members.
And it did. I mean, Frank stated earlier, Sens put on that approximately 50 million. So the question is, what you do with it? So if you took the rebate and gave it back to the general fund, okay, so that's fine. But if you want to benefit the employee and the members, then you share that. I mean, private companies do it that way, okay. or you take the savings that you've had in your rebate and you give it to the next year's premiums, thereby reducing your premiums. So that's a policy decision on your side. So I mean, take that pool of money, Senator Rodriguez. I will encourage you to fund Medicaid. Because that's a whole different population segment that we're dealing with that needs help. So, do you want to benefit your market, Jim, with the GovCom employee? Then take your rebates,
okay,
and give it, shared with like what Frank is saying. Well, you need to incentivize the you and your family to do the gym. We're completely opposite in our paradigm from 10 years ago. We didn't want you to go to the doctor like Staywall, and we rewarded you. It's the opposite now. We want you to go to the doctor, get that one physical exam, and then follow up after the doctor tells you, you got some problems, start doing this. And then the rebates come directly back to the member.
I appreciate that.
And when I said that ultimately the government wants benefits, Senator, you recall the sad stories that we had in our island. Two very good doctors that because they forgot to do their preventive exams, unfortunately found too late in life that they had some critical issues. So ultimately, if you find early enough, you're able to do these preventive actions as opposed to having to pay for very expensive treatments. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. So we'll, is there anyone else that wishes to testify? If not, we'll call the public hearing on Bill 395 and work with the sponsor to move this forward. Okay? Thank you very much. We'll now move on to Bill 377. Senator Aguon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just want to personally thank you for hearing this particular piece of legislation before us. Mr. Chairman, there's a need for clarification and establishment of a policy government-wide that would further support our veterans and those who are experiencing mental health issues. And this legislation came out from a particular individual who had sought over a year and has shared with a number of individuals in his work site the need, for additional mental health support. And unfortunately, there was not a structure in place where, in fact, he was given the proper direction. And no need to mention exactly where he's at today, but because of some of those complications that existed, there's got to be a general policy, not only for inclusive of our veterans island-wide, but also for our government of Guam employees who are experiencing mental health issues. So this is a proposal to begin the discussion in terms of how we can ensure that there is a structure, there is a course of action that's readily available, a policy government-wide that would allow some of our public employees the opportunity, especially our veterans, to acknowledge that there is help out there. They just need to be able to know where to get it, how to get it, and when to receive it. So I thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for conducting the hearing on this measure.
Thank you very much, Senator Aguon. So we'll continue to keep the record open on Bill 377 and continue to receive any written testimony on this bill. Now I'll move on to Bill 316-33. Senator Vice Chairman Tony Ada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Bill 316-33 COR is a bill to implement the Right to Try Act on Guam. And what it does is the Right to Try Act legislation that allows terminally ill patients to access investigational treatments that have passed basic safety testing phase 1 with the FDA, but are not yet available on pharmacy shelves. This legislation is modeled after the Goldwater Institute, which serves as the model for over 25 state right to try laws. Over 1 million Americans die from a terminal illness every year, and many spend years searching for a potential cure or struggle in vain to get accepted into a clinical trial. Unfortunately, FDA red tape and government regulations restrict access to promising new treatments. And for those who do get access, it's often too late. Right to try has been signed into law in 31 states. Why do we need a right to try law? Under present regulatory practices with the FDA, fewer than 3% of terminally ill patients gain access to investigational treatments through clinical trials. Right to try was designed to help the other 97%. While millions of Americans will be diagnosed with or die of terminal illness each year, compassionate use of exceptions are only granted to about 1,000 patients a year. Many patients run out of time before they can qualify for the exemption or complete the process. The right to try laws help patients get immediate access to the medical treatments they need before it's too late. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Ada. The committee will keep the record open until such time it issues a committee report and invites the public to submit any written testimony. Now move on to Bill 172. It's introduced by Senator Nicolas. Understand that we do have a sponsor statement that's going to be part of the record, And likewise, we'll keep this open until for the public to provide any written testimony. The committee also continued the confirmation hearing of Mr. Ray Tahaji to serve on the Board of Allied Health Examiners. We understand that the appointee is unavailable, is off island, and so the committee will schedule another public hearing for that individual. There are two other items on the agenda that were initially on the agenda but will be removed at this time. That's Bill 328 and Bill 173. Okay, Senators, anything else any senators would like to say? If not, we'll call this hearing and adjourn it at 12:10 p.m. Thank you.